Dan, for a long time, has been the motivating force behind V&MRJ at first Varian and then Agilent, and now is the motivating force behind Open V&MRJ, which he will talk about. So let me give the microphone to you.
Okay, thank you, Dave.
Okay.
So I'm not practiced at this. I'm an R&D guy, and I don't often give talks, but we'll see how it goes. So welcome to the inaugural Ivan meeting. Like I say, my name is Dan Iverson, and I have been the software engineering manager at Varian and Agilent for quite a few years. My last project at Agilent was actually the Open V&MRJ project. It lasted about 18 months. And this meeting has helped to provide a mechanism for Varian, like John, I'm just going to call it Varian, not Agilent, Varian, for Varian users to help each other. And with that in mind, we think that Open V&MRJ is a pretty good foundation to keep progress going forward. So here's an outline. I have my outline of the talk. I'm going to give a little background about how we got here. What's in Open V&MRJ? And one of the big things is the licensing issues for Open V&MRJ. We'll go over that a little bit. Review some of the mechanics of some of the things that you can do with Open V&MRJ, how the process of getting access to it, and things like that. What the current status of the project is, and then how people can help contribute to Open V&MRJ. So for the background, it all started one day, October 14th. Actually, it's very interesting. That was a Tuesday, and on a Monday prior, we got a meeting announcement from the president of our group. No one ever talks to the president. I said hello to him like once. But we had a meeting, says, okay, there's going to be a meeting tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. All of NMR needs to attend. And it was interesting. I mean, there's like HR people hovering around the edges of the meeting room, and they were all sort of whispering to each other, and it was a little scary. About 45 minutes later, people were told to go see their boss, and about 95% of the NMR team was let go. They have a euphemism they call workforce management. So they were all workforce managed out the door. About, I think, 300 or 400 people. They gave them a little bit of buffer. They had like 2 months. They didn't have to come into work, so they had a little bit of buffer, but it was a sad day. I wasn't let go. I was put on what they call the lights out team. So our job was to turn the lights out, to finish up all of the commitments we had made, to empty out lab rooms, the demo rooms and all that. So that, in theory, was going to be 1 year project for the lights out team, and then the following October, the lights out team would go away. And then there was also something called the long-term team, and they're still there. That's basically the tech support team. So Agilent has said that they will support instruments for 7 years after they deliver them. So the tech support team, there's still about, I think, 6 people at Agilent that are committed to tech support for NMR systems. All right. So then the next thing that happened, like 10 days later, actually, we started the Open V&MRJ Open Source Steering Group. That name came from Josh Karutz, who actually initiated the spin sites thing. And what it was at the beginning was really a group, an invisible by invitation only group on spin sites. And so for the next couple months, we invited people. And basically started having conversations about how we can open source V&MRJ. And so my initial thought was, we have to give this stuff to someone. And I thought initially we'd give it to AMMRL. It seemed like a logical place. You know, they're interested in keeping things going. So I invited AMMRL people from the junta, people know what that is, and who are also members of Spin Site. So that would say they're Varian people on the AMMRL junta. I also invited people on Spin Sites who had complained about or suggested that Agilent should release this stuff as open source. So whoever made any comments about open sourcing VNMRJ, I invited to this group. And then there are a couple people I invited just because I liked them. Gareth Morris, who is actually the only other person in the world who has ever had access to the source code for VNMRJ. And so I figured he would be a good person. The next 3 months between October and February, basically we had to get approval from Agilent to do this. And that involved seeing if there were any licensing issues with the existing software, making sure the other groups at Agilent had no problem with it, mainly the service group we were concerned about, if they would care if this stuff was open sourced. And they finally approved on February. And also during that same period, the VOSSG guys were talking about licensing issues and basically starting to work out the details of open sourcing this thing. On February 26th, we had the first official VSOSG meeting, and actually got the presentation for that. So one of the, this was given by my boss. My initial boss was actually WFM'd out the door, but his boss became my boss. And so he presented this, and this is what he identified as, you know, what we're trying to do here. There was also a letter that was written by users to the president of our group recommending certain things that Agilent should do since they got out of the business, and one of the things they recommended was to open source VNMRJ, and that actually helped a lot. The president listened to those guys and actually tried to do what was right. So from the community perspective, this is what we're hoping we can do, the initial proposal. And then from Agilent perspective, you know, they really want to just get out of it, frankly. But, you know, they wanted to have a home where people can use this software. And Jonathan Gray, who gave this talk, was actually very supportive. So this is the list of the initial VSSOG guys. Quite a wide range. I put AMMRL on the people who were from the junta. And then the Agilent people over there on the right-hand side. There were a couple other Agilent people. There was a lawyer involved at one point, and there was a business development officer involved, and the GM was involved, a few other people. One name you'll see missing is Mike Strain. When we had this first meeting, he wasn't in the list, but that will become important in a couple slides. So, you know, Agilent's very big on charts and graphs, and so this was sort of the workflow of providing this source as open source. At the very top is Agilent management, and so the boxes sort of start Agilent, and it moves down a little bit, and so that the third row is the community. So we're trying to transition things from Agilent into the community. As you go further down the timeline, it's all supposed to be the community. And so this was the key steps. And so one of the things was to form a project group. And so we identified a management track, and Dave Rice stepped up to be the head of the management track, and Jonathan Gray was the corresponding Agilent person. So we had a community person and an Agilent person on the management track for OpenVJ. There's also a technical track, and Tim Burrows from Toronto volunteered to be sort of the lead of the technical track. So he and I basically, I was the internal Agilent person, Tim was the community person for the technical track. we needed to find a legal entity. And so my idea of AMRL didn't pan out. The lawyer said, what's a legal entity is someone who pays taxes. And so we had to find someone who would pay taxes. And our original plan with the group was Dave Rice was looking at Stanford, and that made a certain amount of sense since Varian came from Stanford. And Eric Paulson was looking at Yale. Neither one of them eventually took it. And what happened was we had a meeting at the ENC in 2015, and Walt, who was one of the members, was the roommate of Mike, and Walt happened to mention to Mike that we have this little organization, and Mike became interested, and he eventually actually worked his magic at the University of Oregon, and they now own VNMRJ. So by own, copyright was transferred. This is again lawyers. The copyright was transferred to the University of Oregon. Some of the other things, while all that was happening, what I was doing, I was told by the lawyer, you have to take out all the Agilent signage, all the Agilent copyright statements, clean it up, get rid of anything that's licensed, and basically prepare this for open source. So that took a while. That's what I did. The governance model, that has to do with who has the rights to make changes to the source code, how we're going to manage things like that, what licensing issues are. We had a meeting once a month for, 6 or 7 months. It was difficult because people are all over the world. John Ryan used to get up at 4 a.m. to join our meeting when Gareth Morris was at 7 p.m. Gareth's in England, John's in Australia. It was easy for me. It was 9 o'clock California time, so I got to sleep a little late, but it was good. All right, so back to the timeline. One of the first things that we had to do, we were very democratic. We had to vote on a name, and those were the 3 names that were in the running. And it was actually a unanimous decision by the team, 12 people, I guess. They all voted for Open VNMRJ. Sort of parallel with the efforts to open source things is we also wanted to make sure that people could get access to 4.2. And so we worked at getting 4.2 available for everybody for free, and also passwords for various of the passworded options. So everything now you can get for free from Agilent. The next thing, October, is when we actually transferred the rights to University of Oregon. And that was also the time when the Lights Out team was over, right? It was 1 year. So that was 1 year later it took us to do this. And so the Lights Out team, which I originally was on, was shown the door. They transferred me, they didn't show me the door just yet. They transferred me to the long-term team. Long-term team in Agilent speak didn't last very long. It lasted 6 months. And I was out in April. And that's basically, I was the last R&D member of NMR to be exit, which I don't know, is that good or bad, but I was actually the last one. They still do have the tech support people there. And then in September at SMASH, we actually made the announcement. There was a press release, which is actually back there if you want to see it. We made the announcement that OpenVNMRJ is now available. So that's sort of a history. So what's in it? It's basically the 4.2, identical code to the 4.2 with the 110 patch installed. And everything that has Agilent has been removed. There shouldn't be nothing that pops up should have the word Agilent in it. All the source code that runs on the PC is included. The numerical recipes guys have some peculiar licensing issues, and so we actually have to put object code for things that have numerical recipes. There's very few, mainly gradient shimming, that have numerical recipes. So we actually have to put object code for things that have numerical recipes. And so we actually have to put object code for things that have numerical recipes. There's very few, mainly gradient shimming, that have numerical recipes. There's very few, mainly gradient shimming, and some dozy pieces. But all the rest of it is available as open source. The source code that runs in the console is there, but you can't compile it. So Agilent made a decision that you can recompile and do anything you want with the code that runs on the host, but the code that runs in the console, for liability reasons, and they think that people might be able to damage the console, they didn't want to provide console software. So OpenVJ actually uses the exact same console software that VJ 4.2 uses. And it supports those systems. One more way to look at the content: 3 million lines of code, which is quite a bit. It's mostly C and C++ and Java. All of the windows and things are XML. You know, there's magical macros, there's pulse sequences, so it's all in there. You know, it's a lot of files. It took, like I said, it took us 6 months to collect all this stuff. I removed 8,000 copyrights, which is in itself kind of a painful thing to do. Actually, I wrote a script to do it, so it wasn't so bad. And then also there are some tools for building, so you can download and build these things. So that's what's in it. Then the licenses. So there's a range of licenses, and this is one of the VOSSG issues that we had to deal with. There's a range of licenses, and they settled on 2 of them. The permissive ones basically let you do anything you want, and these GNU guys are weird. They instead of copyright, it's copyleft, and that's a very strict license. So the Apache is permissive, and there's just a few pieces that require this GPL, GNU Public License, because it uses code from GPL libraries, and they're mainly imaging things. And actually the Java front end to OpenVJ has a little bit of GSL code, so all of the Java front end is also GNU GPL licensed. So, like I say, the Apache is very permissive. You can use it, you can do what you want. People can take that code and integrate it into something. All they have to do is say this is the original copyright, but you can use it wherever you want. No restrictions. The GPL, the funny thing about if someone uses GPL code, that means the code they put that into has to become GPL and also then open sourced. So a company is very reluctant usually to use GPL unless they're willing to open source their code. All right, so here, how can you use OpenVNMRJ? So let me write my notes, make sure I'm not forgetting anything. Mechanics. So there is a website, openvnmrj.org. Tim Burrows and Eric Paulson, 2 of the VOSSG guys, were primarily responsible for setting all that up. All of the code has been put on GitHub. And again, those same 2 guys, Tim and Eric, basically set all that up. And in order to actually compile things, you need a couple Linux tools. One's called scons, which is I don't know if you know what makefiles are. It's sort of like a makefile kind of thing. And the other is called Git, which is a source code control system that GitHub uses. And these are all, John Ryan has been very helpful to you guys. And he's got a Kickstart that includes those tools, and he's going to make a new Kickstart that will actually have VJ 4.2 on it, which will help out. So there's OpenVNMRJ, that's the website. You can browse around, it's got, let's see if I get this button. There. Up here, it has all sorts of documents about who we are, how you can contribute, all the details, so you can just go and browse around. If you hit, I guess, this button here, that'll take you to GitHub, which looks like that. So this is the OpenVNMRJ GitHub thing, and there's what they call repos, or I don't know, I just call them a repo. There's a VNMRJ tools, which if you grab that one, that has everything you need to build everything. The actual source code is in this one for everything. All the procs, the foreground background programs, pulse sequences, everything is in this one. Aptors, I'll come to in a little while, and then there's some documentation. So that's it. So if you want to get, okay, so actually, so if you go to, if we go to this one, which has all the source code in it, you hit that button, or you click that link, and you go to here, which is, so all the sources are actually in there as a source. Some of these other things, licenses and things, basically just have to have them. But what you can do is you can get the latest, let's see, so what's next? So if you want to basically just get the release, say I just want the release. All right, you can come back here and you just click on, oops, where's the releases button? It's, there it is, right there. You click on that button right there, and it'll give you a little README, and there's a zip file, and you can download it, and you unzip it, and you basically type load.nmr, and you've got it. So you have, that's the last time we built that. You can get either the version for Mercury and Nova, or you can get the version for DDR. So that's pretty simple. Another thing you can do is you can actually build it yourself. So if you want to build it yourself, you would go to OVJ Tools, which is this one. Which one is this one? And it would look similar to that. It would say, up here it would say OVJ Tools here, but basically the contents are pretty much the same. And there's a little download button right here. So you click that little download button, and it will basically download into your system a directory of these OVJ tools. And it contains things that weren't built by Agilent, things like Java and in something called NDDS, which is the communication protocol that we use to talk to the console. Things that are basically third-party applications that are required to build OpenVNMRJ. And if you basically go in there, you copy a file, there's a manual that describes how to do it, and you type one command, and anywhere from 30 minutes to 2 hours later, it'll have built a complete release. And so what's the advantage of just getting the pre-built one versus building it yourself? Well, we make the pre-built one occasionally, right? We made one about a month ago, and as people make changes to the source code, we don't every time make a change update the pre-built one. So the pre-built one is usually a little bit out of date. So if you build it yourself, you have the latest of anything that has been put into the source code. So that's the primary difference between those two. So then the third thing, so you can either get the one you want, build it yourself, or you can actually contribute. So if you want to edit something and submit something back to the community, that requires a little more work. You need a GitHub account, which is free. And then what you need to do is basically fork. There's some details about how you set it up, but it's documented in the documentation. You need to get the OpenVNMRJ tools thing so that you can build it. But then you need to, we don't let you build OpenVNMRJ directly here. You basically have to do what they call fork a copy for yourself. So this little button up here says fork. You can see there are 3 or 4 forks, 3 forks. So you click that and it says it'll make a copy of this for your personal use. Right? And so now you can download that into your computer, make the changes you want. Let's go back to the list. We're up to number 4. So then 5, or actually 5, you fork it, and then you basically can modify this little build script. This is the one command you have to run to tell it that I'm going to build a download version. So I think my next slide. Yeah, so this is a portion of that script. And so the only thing you need to do is basically enable this thing called SSH. It's details, but it's simple. And you want to build the development branch, which is, where'd that light go? Here. So you uncomment this line, you comment that line, and put your name. When you sign up for GitHub, you have a username, and you put that in there. And basically, that's all you need to do. You run build v-nmrj, and it will build the thing. You can make your changes. If you just want to build the DDR and not the Mercury Nova portion, this tells it, build the DDR. That tells it to build the Mercury Nova. If you don't want the Mercury Nova, you comment out this one, and it won't build the Mercury Nova. All right, so where am I? So after you modified that script, you learn a little bit of scans, if you want. You have to learn a little bit of Git if you want to do this thing, because you basically make your changes, and then you use Git to add your changes back into the repository, the repo, and then you have to commit those changes, and then you push the changes up to the GitHub server. And once you get them up to the GitHub server, then you basically do what's called a pull request, which is there. So it'll update after you do your push. This will, in your account, see this one's mine, so it says, oops. So this is my account. It's forked from here, so I made my own fork. And so if I push my changes up here and then do a pull request, that sends a message to the official one that says someone wants to make a change. And then the people in charge of actually committing those things, which is basically at this point Tim Burrows and myself, decide, are these changes okay? They've been tested, do we want to do it? And there's ways to make comments and basically code reviews and things like that. So, we don't want to put bugs into it. So that's sort of the process. It's not terrible. You can see there's 65 changes have been made since we initially started this. Each one of those commits is some small subset of changes to fix something or add something. So that's that piece. Okay, so the current status. Everything is there. It's all on GitHub. There's an issue tracker, so if you have a bug or you want to make a suggestion, I think there's where'd the issue, it's there. So issues, you can just, GitHub is actually a nice tool. Right up here, there's an issues. I think I'm done jumping here. So Trello, I haven't used Trello much, but it's there for project management kind of tools, but we haven't actually taken advantage of it, I don't think. Slack we've been using, that was set up, I think, either by Mike or Tim. Basically just communications, people who are doing development on this thing can open up things and just talk to each other. It's a lot like spin sites in that sense. And then OpenVNMRJ gives the .org gives the overview of the whole project. So like I say, the last release can be taken directly from GitHub. It's based on 4.2. It's compatible with all of those different OSs. The Ubuntu stuff was done mainly by a guy named Michael Tesh, who's an imaging guy. And I'll come to these have actually been running OpenVNMRJ, I believe, at Merced on a Propulse system, and I think Mike has it running on a Nova system and a Mercury system for, I don't know, probably 6 months now, would be my guess, something like that. So, it's working. Since 4.2 was released, we actually fixed a couple of little bugs. So in one sense, OpenVNMRJ is better than 4.2. There's a little hidden bug in 4.2 that people are going to run into eventually when they upgrade OSs, which we fixed. Dave had that problem, so we found out what that was. I don't know if anybody watches spin sites, but I was working with a guy named Robin Hood, real name, had a problem with QTune. This went on for like months and months to try to figure this thing out, but we finally found out what it was, and then little detail bugs. We've fixed some other things because we know we want to fix this night queue bug that's been lingering around for a long time. So we added a piece in there that will help fix that bug. We haven't actually fixed that bug yet, but we will. Tim Burrow actually is a Mac aficionado, and so he made the version use the new CLang compiler for Macs, and he also uses dynamic libraries for the pulse sequences. So he did a lot of things to make it work well on a Macintosh. We've included 2 new tools, which are kind of interesting. I'll come to those in a second. And then this thing called Switch VJ, which was contributed again by John Ryan. And the reason that's important is Agilent doesn't support OpenVNMRJ. So if you have a system that has a bug or a problem and you need Agilent service, they won't service if it's running OpenVNMRJ. But what John has done is wrote a little script that switches it back to 4.2. So you can have them both installed on the system, and if you're running OpenVNMRJ and you find a problem with the console somehow, you can use John's Switch VJ to switch it back to 4.2, demonstrate the problem, and then Agilent will come and fix it as long as it's running 4.2. And then when they're done, you can switch it back to OpenVNMRJ. So it's a handy little script. So these are the 2 I skipped over. So one of the things we did was to make it easy for people to submit software without having to go and recompile things. So if you got a set of macros or you got some pulse sequences that you think would be useful for people, I'm hoping everybody here knows what an apter is. It's basically a directory with subdirectories like MacLib and PSGLib and things. You can put all your software into an apter and submit it as an apter to OpenVNMRJ. And this little tool will go, it's called OVJ apps. We'll go and see who submitted any apters recently. So that's the list of apters that have been submitted by various people. So if you click that ProcPack bar there, what you get is a little description of what this apter is. This was actually submitted by Scott Burt for some plotting, customized plotting routines. All right, so so that's what you get if you click here. If you click here, it'll actually install that apter, and you'll have all of Scott Burt's contributions. So you don't have to, build anything. You can just get, if someone has something new, they can use this to find out what users have done and basically grab it. If you want to submit your own, there's another little tool called OVJ Submit, and basically you tell it where your apter, oops, I keep hitting the wrong button. You tell it where your apter is here, you give it a title, which will become this title, and you give it a version number, but just version 1. A comment, it has to have your username for some reason. Oh, because it's gonna submit it through your account into GitHub. So you actually do have to have a GitHub account to do this. And then the description here is what shows up when they click the button. So if you build an apter, you can use this little thing and fill in a few little blanks and hit the submit button, and everybody then will have access to an apter that you've developed. So that's sort of the simplified way to share things. This was built mainly by Tim Burrows again. All of the background stuff is Tim Burrows, and I built the windows and the user interface piece of it. So that's that. Coming to the close right on time. So contributions. So how can people contribute to this effort? First thing you can do is start using OpenVNMRJ. You know, suggestions from GitHub or spin sites, and again, bug reporting. So we're looking to keep this thing alive and fixing things as we can. If there are new bug fixes, if people can volunteer to test them. I mean, you know, Agilent used to do this, but we have to do this as a group now. Any Aptor submission using this app submit thing has to be licensed Apache 2. That's one of the management rules that the VSSG guys decided was anything that gets submitted to OpenVNMRJ has to be available for everybody to use. And there's actually a contributor license agreement that you sign that says, look, I'm giving this to this community with no strings attached, basically. Actually, at this point, so one other thing that's happening, and I'm going to invite Krish up here, is Krish and I are collaborating. So I'm a sole proprietor now. I have a company, and Krish has had a company for a while, and we intend to together contribute to OpenVNMRJ. There's a list of some of the ideas that we've had about possible enhancements or things that we might add for OpenVNMRJ, and we're looking for others to, you know, make suggestions. So I'm going to actually turn it over to Krish now. Actually, I'll do the first part. So this gives you a little bit of who we are. So OpenVNMRJ Solutions. Actually, I go to coffee group every Thursday of former Agilent people, and together we actually come up with that name. There's a guy named Dwight Addis, who was in the accounting, actually suggested the solutions part, which I liked. But anyway, so that's my history. I was what they call a master software engineer, and then Chempacker is Krish. He's the main developer of basically Chempack and Craft, but also, you know, one of the applications fellow. And he wrote that mission statement, so I'm going to pass this to Krish.